fire feels familiar. You've seen it your whole life in candles, fireplaces, grills, and stoves. It appears instantly, bright and alive. Yet most people never stop to ask what it truly is. Fire seems like a thing, something you can point at and name. But it isn't a solid object, and it isn't alive either. Fire is an event. It's a process unfolding right in front of you. Once you start asking why fire exists at all, you begin pulling on a thread that leads deep into how matter, energy, and life itself are connected. First glance, fire looks simple. Something burns, heat appears, light flickers, and eventually the fuel is gone. But nothing about fire is actually simple. The materials involved can sit together for years without change. Wood can rest in open air for decades and never ignite. Oxygen surrounds it constantly, touching it, colliding with it, and yet nothing happens. This raises a powerful question. If fire is so energetic, why doesn't it happen all the time? The answer lies not in magic, but in motion, energy, and patience. Everything around you is made of atoms, always moving, always colliding. Even when objects seem still, their atoms are vibrating. Some atoms are more eager to connect than others. Certain combinations release energy when they join, settling into more stable arrangements. But wanting to connect isn't enough. Atoms must overcome a kind of invisible hurdle before they can bond. Without enough motion, they simply bounce apart again. Fire begins only when that hurdle is crossed, and crossing it requires energy. Imagine a ball sitting in a shallow dip at the top of a hill. The valley below represents a more stable, lower energy state. The ball wants to roll down, but the small ridge in front of it keeps it stuck. Without a push, it stays put forever. Atoms behave the same way. They may want to rearrange themselves, but unless they receive enough energy to climb over that barrier, nothing happens. Fire begins when atoms finally receive that push. Heat provides that push. When you warm a material, its atoms move faster. Faster motion increases the chance that atoms collide with enough energy to cross the barrier. Once a few atoms succeed, they release energy when they bond. That released energy doesn't vanish. It spreads, shaking nearby atoms, making them move faster too. Suddenly, more atoms gain enough energy to react. This creates a cascading effect where reactions feed more reactions, accelerating rapidly. That sudden acceleration is why fire appears instantly instead of slowly. It's not a gradual change. It's an explosion of activity at the atomic level. One reaction triggers two trigger four. And the numbers multiply in fractions of a second. Billions of atomic bonds form almost simultaneously. The result is flame, heat, and light bursting into existence. Fire doesn't grow calmly. It erupts because it is a chain reaction fueled by its own energy output. The heat you feel from fire isn't a substance flowing into your skin. Heat is simply motion. When atoms vibrate faster, they transfer that motion to nearby atoms, including those in your hand. That's what warmth is. Fire releases energy by speeding up atomic motion, and that motion spreads outward. The hotter something is, the faster its atoms are moving. Fire is one of the fastest ways to turn stored energy into rapid motion. Fire is not matter. You can't scoop it up or store it in a container. It exists only while reactions continue. Once the loop is broken, fire disappears instantly. Remove heat, remove fuel, or remove oxygen, and the process collapses. That's why fire spreads and why it can also be stopped. It survives only by sustaining the feedback loop that keeps atoms moving fast enough to keep reacting. This understanding leads to a deeper realization. The material that burns didn't always look the way it does. Long before it became fuel, it was part of something living. The substance of wood, for example, didn't come primarily from the ground. That idea feels intuitive, but it's misleading. The majority of a tree's mass comes from the air. Plants quietly pull invisible material from their surroundings and turn it into solid structure. Air contains carbon in a dispersed form. Plants take that carbon and rearrange it, using energy from sunlight. Water contributes too, but the bulk of the structure comes from the atmosphere. Soil provides only a small fraction, minerals and trace elements. When wood burns, the tiny pile of ash left behind represents everything that actually came from the ground. Everything else escapes as gas, returning to the air it originally came from. Plants perform an incredible reversal. While fire releases energy by allowing atoms to settle into stable bonds, plants use energy to force atoms apart. They take tightly bound molecules and separate them, storing energy in the process. This requires constant input. Sunlight provides it. Light delivers energy particle by particle, slowly building complex structures out of simple components. This is how living matter is assembled. The energy plants capture doesn't disappear. It becomes locked inside chemical bonds. These bonds hold atoms apart in unstable arrangements, like stretched springs waiting to snap back. That stored tension is potential energy. When the structure is later broken down, that energy is released. Fire is one way this release happens, fast and uncontrolled. Life uses the same energy more slowly, in carefully managed steps. When wood burns, it's not creating new energy. It's releasing energy that was already there. The light and heat pouring from the flames are the same energy that once arrived as sunlight. Burning wood is sunlight returning to motion. A log in a fireplace is the past shining again. Every flicker is energy that once touched leaves, was stored for years, and is now set free in seconds. This explains why fuel doesn't ignite on its own. The stored energy remains locked away unless something starts the process. Without enough heat, atoms stay trapped behind their energy barrier. They collide endlessly without reacting. A spark, flame, or high-temperature region provides the initial boost. Once started, the reactions supply their own energy and sustain themselves until something interrupts the loop. The air itself plays a critical role. Free oxygen didn't always fill the atmosphere. It accumulated gradually as plants released it during their energy-capturing processes. For plants, oxygen is excess material, discarded back into the air. Over time, this buildup transformed the environment. Eventually, organisms evolved ways to use oxygen to release energy from stored carbon, giving rise to powerful biological processes. What happens in fire also happens inside your body. Every time you breathe, your cells are combining carbon-based molecules with oxygen. This releases energy in controlled steps, fueling movement, thought, and warmth. The process is slower, quieter, and more efficient, but chemically similar. You are constantly performing a form of combustion. The difference is regulation. Your body captures the energy instead of letting it escape as flame. This means fire isn't separate from life. It's part of the same cycle. Energy flows from sunlight into living structures, then back into motion and heat. Carbon circulates between air, plants, animals, and back again. Fire simply makes the cycle visible. It compresses years of stored energy into a brief, dramatic display. The colors of fire reveal even more. Light is emitted when energized particles release excess energy. Different substances produce different colors because their internal structures differ. This is why flames can glow yellow, red, or blue depending on what's burning. The flame becomes a kind of fingerprint, showing the atomic activity happening inside. Smoke and ash tell another story. Smoke contains tiny particles that never fully reacted, lifted upward by heat. Ash is what remains when everything combustible is gone. It represents the smallest fraction of material, the minerals that couldn't become gas. The rest has returned to the air, invisible but unchanged in total mass. Fire teaches a powerful lesson. Nothing truly disappears. Matter rearranges. Energy transforms. What looks like destruction is often just change. Fire breaks complex structures back into simpler forms, releasing stored energy along the way. It closes a loop that began long before the flame appeared. So fire is not an enemy or a mystery. It's a conversation between matter and energy, a reminder of how deeply connected everything is. Every flame tells a story that began with light, passed through life, and ends in motion. And when you watch a fire burn, you're not just seeing destruction. You're witnessing energy completing its journey.